Welcome to the Tales Fantastic Podcast. Each episode features a super short fantasy story for your listening enjoyment. I'm Manel Oliphant, the writer and illustrator of the stories at talesfantastic.com. Today's story is called Vanity. You can read it online, see the illustration, and follow links to download it for free at talesfantastic.com/vanity. If you enjoy reading or listening to Tales Fantastic stories, you can support their continued creation at patreon.com/Manel Oliphant. Vanity is the story of a man who has a run-in with a fairy and learns the silliness of his vanity. Keep listening after the reading to hear more about where the idea came from and the story writing process. Vanity, a short story by Manel Oliphant. I had been the mayor of our town for many years and wasn't worried about the upcoming election. My only competitor was Farmer Greenhorn. He was a good man, but not tall or well-dressed. His voice squeaked like a mouse, and he walked everywhere he went. So, with the election thoughts far from my mind, I got ready for market day. I put on my finest suit, heeled shoes, and hat with a tall feather. I was very self-conscious about my height. I gargled with salt water so my voice would be in top form, and took my beautiful carriage to the market. People were happy to see me. I gossiped with the greengrocer. The butcher and I chatted about the choicest cuts of meat, and I gave him permission to mention that I, Mayor Wilverhead, frequented his shop. All the while I complimented the good wife's chubby babies. I was enjoying the crowd's attention a great deal when the town crier walked through the market ringing his bell. Hear ye, hear ye! Master Durin hereby announces his intention to run for mayor in the upcoming election. A person, I assumed to be Master Durin, I'd never heard of him before, walked behind the crier. He was the tallest man I had ever seen, and wore a suit of clothes so beautiful they almost sparkled. Everyone stopped what he or she was doing to watch him. The crier and his client moved on, and the temporary stillness dissipated. The woman I was complimenting scowled at me and moved away. The greengrocer smiled after Master Durin like he was a beautiful memory. It looks like you have some competition, Mayor. I frowned and continued my trip through the market, but the people who before enjoyed my company were unhappy to see me. Some looked over my short stature and turned away, downright ashamed at me being their mayor. After 20 minutes of dismal attentions, I returned home. Throughout the next week, I spent my free time figuring out how to get attentions back on me. I needed to be taller and dress in a more grand style to compete with Master Durin. The next market day, I dressed in shoes even taller than I'd worn the week before, and attached a longer feather to my hat. I'd bought a new suit in a flashy orange color. I felt magnificent as I rode my carriage into the market center. I stepped out with a flourish, expecting great attentions. I didn't get them. The few who did notice me gave my carriage a nasty look as they walked around it. A crowd had gathered in the square. Musicians played a whimsical happy tune I'd never heard before, and Master Durin smiled down at everyone from the crowd's center. They gazed up at him with admiration. He passed out small cakes, and he told the crowd the great things he'd do as mayor. His voice sounded like a thunderstorm. It grabbed my attention and comforted me at the same time. After the presentation, the crowd dissipated, and I stood alone. I needed a more commanding voice. I spent the week speaking loud and trying to make my voice more musical. On market day, I wore even taller shoes, a hat with 2 deliciously long feathers, and my new suit. I marched into town with a basket of candies to give away while a trio of musicians played behind me. I danced my way through the market, shouting greetings in my new voice and giving out candy. The basket emptied of its contents, but I barely got a glance from the shoppers. The grandest carriage I'd ever seen drove into the market, and Master Durin stepped out. No one gave him nasty looks. In fact, people crowded around him and cheered. My stomach tightened. There was only one more week to remind the town of my existence. Maybe my carriage wasn't grand enough. I planned all week. On election day, I woke early to make sure all was in order. I wore my double high shoes, double feathered hat, and eye-catching suit. I practiced my loud voice all week and adorned my carriage with brilliant flowers. 20 musicians followed behind me as I drove into town. I leaped out of my carriage while a beautiful fanfare played and bowed. To my astonishment, everyone was looking. I smiled and took a deep breath. "Good people, I hope for your vote in today's election," I bellowed as I threw candies to the crowd. The people didn't cheer as I'd hoped. They only stared. The awkward silence stretched out around us. The greengrocer chuckled at my suit. "Good mayor, you look like a pumpkin." The smile froze on my face. The butcher laughed. "You sound like a sick dog." My shoulders slumped. A woman fingered a flower attached to my carriage. "Did you crash into a flower stall?" At this, everyone laughed. I stood dumbfounded. I noticed the heaviness of my hat and realized I had a sore throat and sore feet. I looked at my carriage. The flowers had cost a fortune. Now I couldn't remember why I had done it all. I joined in the crowd. We laughed for a good 5 minutes, and when we stopped, Farmer Greenhorn squeaked, "I would also appreciate your vote today." I started to laugh again, but got glares from the townsfolk. It seemed they liked Farmer Greenhorn. He'd walked to town wearing his work clothes, and his voice was quiet, but everyone noticed him, and they voted for him too. Apparently, he looked more trustworthy. The strangest thing about it all is Master Durin's name wasn't on the ballot. When I asked about it, the election official seemed confused. Other townsfolk gave me weird looks. No one remembered a Master Durin. We had all been enchanted by a fairy. I used to blame that fairy for my loss. But I realize now I lost the election all on my own. My vanity had made me ridiculous. More about Vanity. This is the first story in a series of stories where different characters tell about their own fairy encounters. Imagine a common room of an inn where people are gathered on a cold night. The subject of fairies comes up, and the former mayor is the first to tell his fairy story. Finding the illustration for this story was a challenge. I wrestled for a while trying to choose which scene to draw. Originally, I wanted the scene to have the fairy in it. But since he is such a minor character, it was hard to find one that felt right. Eventually, I decided on the illustration you see. It's the end scene, and the fairy isn't even there. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this recording of A Tales Fantastic Story. You can find more stories and illustrations at talesfantastic.com. If this recording is something you liked, I hope that you'll share it with your friends. Thanks again.